with us insights from within China and beyond. The first is Madame Sylvie Bergman, the ambassador from France to China, the first female ambassador in France-China history dating back to the 19th century. And she is a fluent Chinese speaker. And Madam Ambassador is a fluent Chinese speaker, and her first stint in Beijing dates back to 1976, if I'm not mistaken. And that's the last year of Cultural Revolution. So she does know China very well, probably more than a lot of Chinese, including myself. And the two ladies sitting beside Madam Ambassador is Miss Gao Lan from Lenovo, currently the world's second largest PC company, hoping to be the first. And then she is the Vice President on HR, especially focusing on Asia Pacific and Latin American region. She has extensive experience working for both local and international companies, including Thomson, BP, and Novartis. And the lady sitting on the left side of the ambassador is Hong Jing. Of course, probably a lot of you will recognize her face. She is one of the rising talents for the Women's Forum. And also, despite that she's rising at this forum, she's already one of the few most senior female PE investors in China today. And Hong Jing is currently the managing director of General Atlantic, and this is the firm for global growth equity firm. And she set up the General Atlantic's Beijing office, and currently is focusing on emerging market, consumer-oriented growth companies. Welcome, Hong Jing. And the gentleman sitting beside me is Jean-Yves Nory. Pardon if my French is not good enough. So he is the executive chairman and COO of Publicis Group, and which is the third largest communication group of the world. And he is the founding partner of Publicis Consultants, and he used to head different departments ranging from the shared service center, IT, real estate, insurance, healthcare, communication, production. And he has extensive China experience, and in the year 2010, he was the the head of the China Publicis. Was that right? And then the gentleman on the far end is Mr. Paul DiPaola, and he is the partner of Bain Company, one of the world's leading management consulting firm. He's currently based in US, but he travels to China very often. I heard probably once a month. He focused on technology, telecom, and media, and between the year 2001 and 2008, he was the managing partner for Greater China for Bain. And he advised many, many Chinese companies, both going overseas as well as international companies venturing into the Chinese market. Among those is Lenovo. And we shared a wonderful story about how he advising Lenovo to buy IBM instead of obscure little company in the US. So without further ado, I would love to start our discussion today, because this is really a wonderful topic. So it's interesting question, is China becoming the next world market? And a lot of people say yes. Among this, there is Chinese Commerce Minister Chen Zheming, who said that China will become, by the year 2015, China will definitely become the world's largest market, and will with the $5 trillion US market. And the AmCham published a report and says China is definitely big, but it's going to be the second by the year 2015. It will be the second only after the United States, and it will take up to 14% of the world's consumption, the world's consumer market. Whether it's number one or number two, it's definitely big. So let's hear from our panelists today how big it's going to be and who are the real consumers. Let's start from Hong Jing. Please give us a general idea of the Chinese consumer market, as well as who are the buyers.
It is true that the typical question people have about China consumer is, number one, are they spending or are they saving? People keep talking about Chinese people are flushing to Paris, and they're waiting in lines in front of stores of Louis Vuitton, and they buy so many luxury bags and watches and go home. But on the other hand, people say, hey, wait a minute. China is still has the highest saving rate. We're talking about 42% of saving rate in the world. That's almost the highest in the world. And if you dig further, some people recognize that the consumption as a percentage of GDP actually decreased from 45% in 1996 to 35% in 2011. So what's really going on there? How can we reconcile this? So first of all, let's recall what Professor Marilyn said yesterday. We should put the GDP aside because it could misleading you sometimes. Yes, China consumer market is growing. In 2011, they grow 17.1%. However, at the same time, the fixed assets investment in China grew 23.6%. So it was not because we're spending less, it's actually because we're investing more. So as a percentage, it looks smaller, but in fact, the market is growing at very high. We're talking about mid-10 growth rate every year. So for the past, early this month, China have this National Day holiday. The consumption growth is still about 15%, 50. Sorry, 15%. And we look at the multinational companies who already came to China. Nike has about 11% revenue from China. Audi, about 19%. April, 20%. The luxury companies from Prada to Cartier to LVMH, they have 20 to 25% revenue from China. And Yum, the quick service restaurant company, have 44% revenue come from China. So the answer to you is yes, China is already became one of the major consumer market in the world. And then talking about the consumers, sometimes I talk with my foreign friends that we said, if you look at the past 30 years of consumers, I myself could be a consumer you can think about. I was lucky enough, I grew up in the city, and I got a good education, went to a board, and worked for a good company. So although I myself, when I was at elementary school, I have to share a pencil with my cousin. But my daughter now using iPad to learn. So that is what drive the Chinese growth for the past 30 years, majority coming from the tier 1, tier 2 cities in the coastal area. But for the coming 30 years, you should look at my helper's son. I'm lucky enough to have I had a helper when I delivered my second baby. She was from the rural area, and she was a middle school dropout. She couldn't afford to go to high school. So she started to work in the coastal areas, export-oriented manufacturers. And she initially worked for textile company and then shoes companies. And then she moved to the city, worked as a helper. And she literally spent nothing. She saved every penny for her son's education. So her son already finished high school, and 2 years ago, he landed a job at the General Motors joint venture in Yantai City. Yantai, for those who may be familiar with China, we call it a tier 3 city. It has the ranking GDP per capita is about 34 in terms of total cities. But by the way, it has 6 million population. In Paris, about how much? 2.2? So his dream is to work at that factory. Now he's a streamline worker. He earned about $700 per month. And his dream is after 3 years he worked there, he will be eligible to buy a car, a Chevrolet car produced by themselves at 20%, 25% discount. So that is Henry Ford building T models for their own workers. So Chinese workers already migrate from producing shoes to foreign consumers to producing cars for themselves. And his another dream is actually buy a house at Yantai City, not Beijing or Shanghai anymore, but third-tier city, still have 6 million population, And his first month of salary is to buy a computer for his girlfriend instead of saving. So that is what we're talking about. Urbanization and the increase of household will be the key drivers for consumers in the next 20, 30 years.
Thank you very much, Hongjing. Then next, let's move to Madame Ambassador and put that in perspective. Now we've already witnessed the anecdotes from Hongjing, ranging from her own story and the story of her kids, as well as the story of the son of her nanny. And they are different Chinese consumers. But how China has evolved through the last several decades, you think that will change the country from currently its current to its current shape?
Yeah, I think those anecdotes are very interesting because it shows the reality in China. In fact, China is going much faster than you expect and than even China is expecting. When China became the second world economy, they were not totally ready for that. And also we have the idea of rural China, and now for the first year the urban citizens are 51% of the population. So it's growing very fast, of course, and for consumer markets, of course, it is very important because it is those who are consuming. The Chinese is reinventing itself, not every day, maybe, let's say every 6 months, and everybody can realize that. And we have some impressions in our country, and we are criticizing the rate of the renminbi, but in the meantime the rate has been increased, and also the low-cost production, and now it's the contrary. They entered quietly in a high-cost era. And there are so many examples of that. And someone from a company said that if you want to make business in China, you have to anticipate Chinese dreams. And between Chinese dreams and reality, it's sometimes less than 5 years. And it's true for, it's exactly what you said before. I think the consumption, domestic consumption, has been rising, even if it's still, as you said, 34% of the GDP, but it is very dynamic. And it is what was at stake during our presidency of the G20. We wanted this rebalancing of the Chinese growth model, because it's a growth which was driven by investments, state investments, and also exportation. And this is not the case. Well, it's continuing, but at the same time, since in Europe there has been a real slowdown, and so the exports towards Europe have been declining. It's a bit different for the US for the time being, but they know they have to change their growth model. So after those 30 years, glorious years, the periods become more difficult for them. But what is interesting in China is that they have this planning system. Every 5 years you have the 5-year plan, and most of the time it is implemented, which is absolutely fantastic because it is not the case everywhere. But also they're very pragmatic, and so they use fine-tuning. So if the inflation raises, they take some measures, and they follow that at the same time every day. So this is a very dynamic society. And I think that there are, of course, opportunities for us. Since now it is more high-cost situation, because the wages are increasing of about 15 to 20% per year, which means that in 5 years' time, the competitiveness of China, if you just consider those figures, will be less an advantage for our companies. except, so they might go to Vietnam, to Burma, or to other countries, except that competitiveness is not all about prices, of course. And so they still be competitive if you consider the high quality of education, also the infrastructures, and also innovation. What is interesting is that China has, I think, 1.8% of the GDP for research and development, and that's one of the highest in the world. And it is mostly funded by private companies. It's the level, I think, of 75%. And we mentioned Lenovo, and we will hear of Lenovo. The first or the second, I don't know. But they do a lot on research, and this is very important. And a lot of companies in China are devoting, of course, a lot of funds, but not only funds. They establish their own universities. I went to Shenzhen to see Huawei and ZTE, and they have a huge city and a huge university. And I think that is what is the most important. We used to consider that the Chinese are copying well, and they're working a lot, but they are not very creative. This is not the case anymore, and they will surprise us in the future. So I will conclude by that. The consumer goods, well, I mean, not because I'm French. I'm glad, of course, that there are more and more people who like our luxurious goods, and also that Paris is our soft power, and we have a lot of tourists coming to France. Last year it was more than 1 million, which is a fabulous increase. And especially during times when they are not supposed to have vacations, because it's during summertime. And also they buy, of course, our wines, but I think it is important to have more products to offer, and also more high technology products. And for instance, since the Chinese are really concerned by green economy and by the environment, I think we should do more in those fields. But, well, again, don't worry, there still be great opportunities in China. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Thanks for sharing with us your views, ranging from the public policy to the vitality of the private sector. And these are very positive notes talking about the engines behind the Chinese economy and the China's growth, although I'm not completely agree with whether China successfully carried out all the 5-year plans, but we keep making them. And one thing you talk extremely important is about the R&D with Chinese private sector. And it's important because China is known as the world factory, but we are at the lower bottom of what we're calling the smiling curve, not really high on the R&D or the service. And Paul, you are an expert dealing with Chinese companies, advising them. So how do you see the innovative capability of Chinese companies?
Well, that's a good question. About 2 years ago, we surveyed about 30 local Chinese companies, and we surveyed their heads of R&D and product development, and you know, they were, as you might expect, Chinese in those positions. They were pretty critical of their own capabilities. Of course, the survey was asking them what's wrong, but they said a couple of interesting things. One, there's not enough money in China put to original research. And if you just look at the numbers in 2011, the U.S. spent about 2.7% of its GDP on R&D, and China spent about 1.4. Japan spends about 3.3. So there's still room for China to spend more on R&D, and there's still room for them to spend more on original research. Secondly, the second biggest issue was failure to generate enough creative ideas. And they attributed that to talent issues. And often they complained that their firms tended just to hire engineers and analytical types. And this is one of the unusual things about China. If you look at the Politburo, it's literally a country run by engineers. right? The whole Politburo is either a civil engineer or a electrical engineer or a chemical engineer. So engineering is pretty important in China, and you tend to get analytical machines, and that's going to have to change. And then, you know, the third issue that the companies were grappling with was picking winners in the pipeline and putting enough money behind it. So, yes, they are making tremendous strides. I don't think there's anybody who doubts that they'll end up in the right place, but there are, by their own admission, you know, once you sort of get into an honest discussion, some real challenges ahead.
Thanks, Paul. And speaking of talents, and probably nobody is more suited in answering that question than Gao Lan. We've been dealing with recruiting talents for one of China's best companies for 3 years. And how do you see the talent market in China? Also, how, especially put that in perspective, comparing with other emerging markets?
Yeah, well, the talent source is kind of a topic in the HR world. Not only for kind of attract talent, but also retention. And Lenovo has been very successful in China. The company brand, the success story is a huge help to really kind of attract talent in the market. But recently, we also find a lot of sort of a phenomenon in the company where we see kind of a sort of some of our talents being attracted by other sort of local Chinese companies or by other multinational companies who have their offices in China. And well, on one side of this, the coin is a nice story. We are proud of it, and we have really grown some talent to supply for other industries or other companies. But on the other side, we need to manage it, right? The good news is actually our attrition rate is actually only half of the market. And you might wondering why. I mean, what makes Lenovo to be able to really kind of, retain the talent within us? I mean, especially in this very kind of a high turnover rate. If I look at what we're doing, I think first of all, really kind of the first thing is to attract the right talent in the market. In China, when you kind of trying to attract talent, first of all, when you look at the kind of the total population, the kind of all the data, you might find this kind of a huge talent pool. But when you really go into the market, trying to recruit people that fit for your purpose, and then you find nobody there, a very limited pool. It's just a kind of very interesting kind of a dynamic that I've been phasing out. And that's why, well, I think it is contributed by the very high demand from both multinational or kind of foreign invested company in China and also the growth of the local companies in China. So in order to really attract the right talent in the China market, you have to be very quick. I have experiences of losing great candidate only because 1 or 2 days delay of approving the offer. I mean, it's just that quick. So it is. I mean, kind of you need to make a quick decision to really, to take the move and to attract the talent. And secondly, as we heard from Madam Ambassador, that the kind of, even though nowadays the average labor cost in China is still low compared with European countries, for example, it is increasing, but still acceptable. But if you look at the top talent, they are really, really kind of becoming very expensive. Could be as expensive as European countries. And you really have to pay a good price in order to attract those great talent in the company. So that is kind of the second phenomenon that I've seen recently. And on the other hand, the fourthly that I want to also to share is, as I said at the very beginning, talent is actually moving across boundaries. You're not only facing competitions within your competitors, you're not only facing competition within either foreign invested companies or Chinese kind of local companies. People are moving around. And for us, I think one of the key kind of, if I may, success factor to really attract the talent and also retain talent with us, I guess, is actually we are very clear about what kind of talent we need in the market. We want people who really want to win, because Lenovo is a very fast-moving company. Paul can kind of evidence about that. I just happen to know that Paul really knows Lenovo better than me do. It is a fast-moving company. We are the fastest kind of grow PC company in the past 13 quarters among PC industries. It's a very fast-moving company. So you've got to find the real talent who want to win and who really dare to deal with the different challenges, with the fast-moving, with the changes around the world in PC industry. And also, also, Lenovo is a very identical about their own culture. In Lenovo, everybody knows about Lenovo culture known as the Lenovo way. And Lenovo way means we do what we say, we own what we do. We actually plan well, kind of sort of before we pledge. We actually perform as long as we promised. And we prioritize company first when it comes into conflicts in between departments, in between kind of business silos. And we also practice improving every day. And also this year, we have introduced the other kind of, what we call it 5th P, which is pioneering new idea. As Ambassador said, Lenovo is really kind of invest very intensively on innovation. And pioneering new ideas for a company like Lenovo is really key. So when we hire people, we need to make sure that we attract those people who believe or share this value, want to have the challenge, really like to really be part of the success. And also, in Lenovo, we provide all different kinds of possible opportunities for people to grow, to perform, to demonstrate, and we pay for performance. So it is very kind of a clear identical, and as long as you attract the right talent who are kind of buying what we are doing and like to be part of the team, you tend to have lower attrition rate, you tend to have more committed employees, and that's why probably it's a kind of a little secret weapon to win for the war for talent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. After hearing this very exciting example of Lenovo, let's turn to Jean-Yves. Jean-Yves. So everybody talks about the internet and the mobile technology, and how is technology changing the landscape? Because is China catching up, or is leapfrogging in terms of the use of technology in developing the Chinese market?
Being an engineer myself, Paul, I will try to not be this analytical machine that you describe. I'll try to bring some emotional aspect in my comments. I've not been able to go to China as early as you've been, but I started in 1981, so I witnessed a number of changes. And one of the things that I've realized is that there is not one single China. We were talking about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, the move from rural areas to the cities. In fact, what strikes me is that there is the tier 1 and tier 2 cities where you can find the middle class population with more than 400 million people with the same level of income that we found in the Western world. And there is the rest, 1 billion people. When you average all this together, of course, we are not where China plans to be in the future as regaining its position as the world leader. I don't think they'll be satisfied with being number 2, but most likely they will try to be number 1 again. But there's a big difference. And as a communication agency, we have entered into China. Probably we are the first foreign agency in this market under the Saatchi brand. And we have seen the evolution of consumption and communication towards and the attitudes toward the brands and fast-moving consumer goods. What we have observed is that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, China was considered as the manufacturing plant of the world. And people were considering China to manufacture their product to bring them back into the rest of the world. Today, China is a market by its own. And no matter what, and despite the increases in salaries, and there is a huge consumption power available in China. And this is why we should look at China as a market and not as a manufacturing plant. Of course, there will be cheaper market. People will decide to move their plants to Vietnam, Cambodia, or other places in the region. But today we have 400 million people that we have scrutinized. We have done 15,000 interviews from tier 1 to tier 5 cities to evaluate what are the dreams of the population, what people are looking for, buying a computer, buying a home, buying a car. And it's very different from tier 1 to tier 5 cities. Complete different kind of population. But what unites all those people is an ambition, a desire to move as quickly as possible. My own experience is that in China, a quarter in China is equivalent to 1 year in the rest of the world. People are moving much faster. Everything can happen tomorrow. And if it can, it should. There is no reason to wait. You have to make things happen. You have to make your plans and decide and make it happen. And with that, everything is possible. So, of course, some of the elements of the 5-year plan may not take place in time, but I'm amazed with the determination and the ambition to become number one in a number of technologies that have been decided at the top level, and to make sure that China will be the leading power in electric cars or in space, aircraft, and so on and so forth. And there is a driving ambition from the top, an ambition from the population to increase their potential, to realize their dream. The biggest challenge that I see is there had been huge move of population from the rural areas to the cities. And it's a big challenge because some of those people may not find that there is enough job creation to satisfy their needs and their expectations. And what are we going to offer them when they have to go back to their places, to their cities? And how do we help continue this move from the tier 5, tier 4 cities to elevate the standard of living in all those markets? Technology is playing a huge role. And we see the rise of a number of tools, the rise of mobile phone. I think that there are, I don't have the latest figures, but I think that there are more than 800 million, 1 billion mobile phone in China. So the numbers are just amazing. The volume of e-commerce is completely crazy, has nothing to do with what we are dreaming in the most advanced countries of the Western world. People are using their toys from dawn to the evening, and combining the best tools, not always with the tools that we know in Europe or in the United States. It's not always with Facebook or Google, but they have, in my view, better tools that are available with Zhenzhen and Tencent, and best platform with Alibaba and QQ. So they don't need all of that, but they are massive users of technology, and this is probably because there is no legacy, there is nothing that was obsolete, that they need to reinvent. Everything is brand new. The level of investment is outstanding. And of course, internet and social media are creating their own revolution, because people keep exchanging on blog, and this creates a strong emulation. People are exchanging their thoughts, and this is what attracts talents, and this is a big driver to make your company the most attractive one in the market. And we have grown our staff above 6,000 people today, and going to 10,000. We have followed our international clients going to China. And today what we start seeing is that some of the most prestigious companies of China are working with us and are asking us to help them go international. Lenovo is one of them, as Huawei and higher. And so we see that China is becoming a world leader, not because of the fact that most of international companies are using them and are using lower wages to produce their product, but because China is becoming a market of its own with all its potential, its resources, and we'll see a number of the most prestigious Chinese brands becoming global brands and global player in the economy.
Thanks. Thanks for talking about several important areas, including the consumer market, as well as the part of the demographic changes, and also the technology. So I would love to ask our panelists probably to elaborate a little bit about demographic changes in China, because that means a lot to who is going to consume what. And part of the changes, I think, aging probably is one of them, and people talk a lot about urbanization and some of the expansion of the middle class. So if you can share your thoughts on how these trends will shape China's market. Probably start with Hongjing.
Talking about urbanization, Madam Ambassador just mentioned China just passed 51% of urbanization ratio last year, and that was equivalent to Japan in 1965, equivalent to Korea in 1975. And Chinese government set a target to improve our urbanization ratio to 55% in 2013. That means we will increase 1%, roughly 1% every year. It means it will be 250 million people will move from rural area to urban area in the coming years. That's a huge number. And so urbanization itself will, in certain extent, improve productivity. So previously, you have to shift your goods all around the countryside, but now people can live in the city, they provide service to each other, and the logistics and the distribution system will be much more efficient. So we think in the future, the service business will be more and more important for China consumption. In terms, back to the urbanization issue you mentioned, where are those opportunities are? I saw some statistics that currently there are roughly 150 cities in China have population more than 1 million. Well, by the way, there are about 35 million in Europe have that similar number of population. By 2020, we're going to have roughly 230 cities with population more than 1 million. But more interestingly, actually 2/3 of the we call new emerging middle class were actually coming from tier 3 cities and below. So China will not be only focusing on Beijing and Shanghai anymore. Beijing and Shanghai each have about 20 million population, and the traffic is a disaster already. So the urbanization in China will not become like big Mexico City with giant one single city, or like Korea, like Seoul count for like 40-50% of the population or GDP. But we predict that China is going to become a city cluster type of urbanization. It means it will be satellite cities surrounded by each different cities, by the core hub cities. For instance, in one Jiangsu province, they may have 12 we call tier 3, tier 4 cities, but then it will have 20, 30, 40 of the smaller cities, tier 5, tier 6 cities, surrounded by those key cities. And because of the population are moving from rural area to urban area, and it's actually created both challenge and opportunity for consumer companies to reach out those lower tier cities. They might need different, they might have different taste with the big cities who already have a lot of exposure to the different brand, and they may need a different distribution system to connect and serve them more efficiently. interesting when we're looking at the consumer behavior, when people just reach a certain level of entering middle class, when people get rich, they buy apparels. They want their friends and people see, you know, I have money. And then they will buy shoes. And they will buy other things people can see from outside. But things like underwear or home appliance.
From the outside.
Exactly. So they're actually coming much later in terms of upgrade. So it means when you're looking at what opportunity is growing faster, you need to understand in which city tiers you're looking at. People won't pay for things other people cannot see yet. Having said that, it's changing. It's changing in the big cities. That's why Louis Vuitton is changing is now trying to hide their logo. They thought their logo got overexposed in China already. So they're trying to add more color on the heritage of the brand and the design. I totally agree with you there. You can't generalize China. You have to look at different cities, different economic stage, and what specific customer segments will grow in the next 5-10 years.
Thanks.
Not on that, but on the aging population, because I think it's one of the most important demographic problem, and especially with the one-child policy, because one child can't support his family now, and it's 8 persons, it's impossible. So there's a new policy, social protection, of course, healthcare. And also it means that there will be that more services for aging people will be needed, and so it's another possibility for China.
And Paul, do you want to comment on the middle class as well as the Asian community, and also what business opportunities that will provide?
Well, I was just a week ago I was reading some interesting numbers. Disposable income is supposed to grow by 126% between 2010 and 2020. Per capita, it'll be about 5,000 US. And it's a good number, I guess. But the interesting thing is there's a lot of wealth, of course, concentrated in those coastal provinces. And when you peel the averages back, there's about, 700 million, 900 million people in the coastal provinces. And they'll be disproportionately wealthy. And their average GDP per capita may be very close by 2020 to the average GDP per capita in the US. So imagine having 900 million people, with an average GDP, or 700 million, somewhere, give or take 100 million, with an average GDP of the US. It's going to be quite something. Your kids will be very, very focused on China, or your nephews or nieces, because there's just a tremendous amount of market size there. So that's what the future holds. It's complex, as everybody on the panel knows. How do you run a business where you sell your cosmetics in some cheap container in a tier 3 city, and maybe a wooden box like we got at lunch for the tier 1 cities? So it's pretty complicated to manage, and that's the biggest challenge. It's a tough place. It's a demanding place to do business. Just packaging alone is mind-blowing in China.
My observation is that there are 2 critical issues to deal with going forward in China. The first one is how to get all the natural resources to fuel the economy. Not only energy, but steel, rare earth, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the biggest challenge. There is the equivalent of 1 power plant put in production every single week in China. So that's mind-blowing, as you say. And the second one is how do we bring consumer product to tier 3, 4, 5 cities? And this is one of the biggest challenge that the largest companies are facing. In the past, they had to deal with tier 1 and tier 2 cities, and there could be some demonstrators in every single shop to promote the product. This is no longer possible given the size of the market, the number of tier 3, 4, and 5 cities. So how can we how do we find enough human resources to make that happen? Unlikely to happen, given the number of cities to deal with. And the chance is that e-commerce is coming in play. And with that, you don't need to have the same level of infrastructure. In the past, for the largest retailer to offer their product, it was a huge headache to build logistic platforms, to equip and to reach out to all the populations. Now, with one platform by province, you can feed and use e-commerce and supply all the goods to the population in tier 3 to 5 cities. So this is the biggest change that we will see happening in the next 5 years. How do we give access? How do we get access to all the population? Because this is where we need to find the next reservoir for the middle class. We have already 400 million people, which is twice the US, already larger than Europe. But there is another 200 and 300 million people who are with a strong appetite to have access to this level of earnings. And they are very demanding. And they don't want to change and to move to the tier 1, tier 2 cities where it is impossible to find an apartment, where it is impossible to find decent transportation, and you live in the suburbs, so very far away from inside city. The public transportation cannot cope with this huge amount of population being moved from one place to the other. So how will the authority manage to help the people stay in their places but have access to the same level of job, goods, and I believe that technology will play a big role, not only e-commerce, but also ECRM will play a huge role. All the social network, all the technology is going to play a massive role in the next 5 years to help those tier 3, 4, 5 cities. People have access to the same level of standard of livings that they could find in tier 1 and tier 2 cities. I'm very confident this will happen.
Well, thanks. Together we break the myth, the biggest myth about China as one block. It's not China market, actually. They are tier 1, tier 2, all the way to tier 5, and they are coastal, they are inland, as well as they are different demographic groups. And if we can move from the macro to the micro level. So what are the hurdles that international companies are usually facing when they enter the China market? Are they different from the difficulties, challenges for local companies? And often from the media, what we care most about is, do they apply equal standard? That when the law is weaker, do they actually bring the same principle or the same standard and quality on the governance in terms of bribery or the transparency? Do they behave as they do in the developed market?
I'll start very briefly. There are two big hurdles. One, Chinese consumers are very, not nationalistic, but they love their country, they love their own brands, and they don't feel they need foreign brands. So the biggest challenge is to make sure that you don't translate your brand and you make it sound Chinese. So, for example, in China, you can't find a Tide product from Procter & Gamble, but you find the Green Wave. They have not translated, but they have, and everybody thinks that this is a local brand and not a foreign brand, and it's probably more appropriate. The second biggest challenge is intellectual property. And of course, a number of international companies are worried about that, and they have been worried for ages. I know that the amount of money, of revenue lost by Microsoft in China only is equivalent to their global R&D budget. So that gives you a perspective. However, as a number of Chinese companies are buying major brands or are establishing their brands in the Chinese market on a global level. I believe that we'll make some progress in that area because the Chinese company will make sure that IP is respected in China, and that will probably be more powerful than complaining to the minister. Although the authorities have made a lot of progress, I think that if the level of consciousness increases and improve in China, this will be will help resolve all those matters. But I think that those are the two biggest challenges going forward.
Well, on intellectual property rights, I fully agree with you because in the past we lost all the trials, but it's a bit different now, and we are more lucky. And the reason is the reason you gave is now they have their own brand, and sometimes they are in the trial against each other. For instance, Huawei and ZTE. So at the end they will protect the marks, but it will take time. I think what foreign companies are facing now is the difficult access to the market, and especially public markets, and because the Chinese want to develop national champions, so they are closing more and more markets without saying it, but that's what they do in reality. And so the European Union and the EU Chamber is very active in that, because there's a report each year, and the Chinese take notice of the report and sometimes make some modification. But what is interesting is that now the problem of the foreign companies in China, there was a survey. It's not intellectual property, and it's even not, market access. Well, it is still a problem, but it's the problem of the salaries.
It's too high?
Yes.
Maybe just to kind of build on what my kind of peers has been talking about from my own experience, that there are still kind of challenges, like for example you said about kind of the kind of the hurdles for multinational companies to do business in China. But what I've seen is actually a lot of kind of changes in the past years, in terms of, say, for example, the business ethics, the kind of, just to give you an example of Lenovo. I joined this company 3 years ago, and when I first joined, I was reading the book of the company, how this company has been so successful. It's been kind of, this company has been about 27 going to 28 years. And it was the time when the economic sort of opening policy in China, and that is, I mean, Lenovo was one of the millions of new startups of China kind of at that time. And if you look at those kind of new startups, very few of them sustained. And only Lenovo becomes the first successful kind of going to global company, a globalized company. And I was very curious to understand why, because my experience before Lenovo has been always with multinational companies, that I was quite curious about why this company can be so successful. So I read through the book, and actually one thing that I find very kind of interesting is Lenovo has set up very high ethical standard at the very beginning. It was as early as if I remember right, 1989, the company published kind of their own kind of ethical chapter, if I use the multinational language. They call it 3 untouchables. It is no bribery, no conflict of interest, and that the other one is kind of a fair treatment. When they call it kind of a fair salary or fair whatever, but in easy understand term, in my kind of a term is fair treatment. And I was shocked, because I still remember the first time that I saw the Global Compact initiated by Kofi Annan from UN, was 2000, the year 2000, that at the time that I worked with Novartis, and we were one of the top 100 companies, first 100 company to sign off this chapter. But Lenovo, a very local Chinese company, had no idea about this global compact at that early stage, have their own kind of ethical chapter. And I believe, personally, I haven't do so much research, but I believe that is the key reason why this company can sustain and why this company can be so successful in long run. So, I mean, that is kind of how, give you an example. I mean, there are a lot of changes, and there are companies who realize that they have to really kind of follow the laws. I mean, respect the IP right and respect sort of a different stuff in order to have a longer term win. And coming back to the other kind of a discussion that I had with kind of, we talk about this dynamic market in China. We have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and tier 6 in Lenovo's term. And we have this coastal, we have this inland, and so different sort of a development sort of a stage. And Lenovo has been very successful in PC business in China. We are kind of the 35% of market share. Well, HP has been kind of a #1 in the market for a long time, and we are very close to HP. And I'm quite sure that we are going to overtake it and become #1 very soon. The thing is, such a successful company as HP has not been able to compete with Lenovo in China. And Lenovo China is #1 in China market, and the next 3 companies combined, which is HP, Dell, and Acer, if they combine together, they are not even close to Lenovo. And why? Well, actually, it's another kind of interesting topic for me to understand this company as an outsider a few years ago. And actually, I find Lenovo is doing business very differently from what I've been seeing in other kind of big multinational companies. They treat this kind of a country as not only one market, but multiple markets. And actually, Lenovo China divided China itself into emerging areas and mature areas. And the tier 1, tier 2 cities are those mature areas where they have very kind of a high buying power, well developed, a lot of money in the pocket, and go after for the big premium sort of products. And the other side is the emerging area. I mean, in emerging area, it can be in very different emerging stage. The poorest that I've seen in Lenovo business is some sort of a rural area, people living in the mountain area without public transportation. The nearest public transportation possible would be kind of bus, and has to take donkeys or little kind of a walk to go to the public transportation. You know what Lenovo did? Lenovo decided this kind of a different sort of business model for emerging area and mature area. For mature area, Lenovo applied kind of a protect strategy and more focus on the high price brand product into that market to address the customer needs. And for the emerging area, we apply attack strategy, where we are more focused on the lower price band products. And what's more is the business model are very different. We actually partnership with a huge amount of channels, business partners to reach out those little rural area, even kind of deliver our computers by donkeys. I mean, you can't imagine, I mean, how this has been so powerful into those areas. That's why it can be so kind of reaching out to all the customers. And this kind of the partnership has been so strong in Lenovo. And I see this company has been developed a very strong partnership culture, and which is known as let the channel wins. It is a win-win kind of a solution for both Lenovo and the partners. And I see a lot of very loyal partners. I can tell you a lot of stories about those partners who have been with Lenovo for 20 years or kind of even longer. And they like this partnership because Lenovo is not only kind of win one deal, but they're building a very long-term, balanced, win-win sort of a relationship with a partner. And I guess that's why Lenovo has been also successful in going outside, because we are using this kind of partnership, balanced sort of approach in addressing our kind of a global market as well.
Thank you, Galen. I'm sure our audiences will love to hear more about Lenovo stories, exciting stories, ranging from donkeys to to all kinds of transportation vehicles and marketing strategy. So now it's time we open up the floor. I'm sure you have questions for our panelists, and please identify yourself, and we have microphone in the audience as well.
Hi there, I'm Laura Bodie with I Live to Lead. And I wanted to suggest that perhaps in addition to a superior product and marketing strategy, one of the reasons for success is just what you mentioned, that the market prefers national champions. And so I've just returned from a month in China where I was a guest of the Chinese government, got to go see some of the best of the green technology that's being developed. And so looking at turbines, wind power, solar, you know, in the last 3 years, the European and American markets have been obliterated because of the commitment by the government, you know, in the last 5-year plan and then again this last year in the new 5-year plan. They've made a commitment to green technology and put the investment in. That's a high R&D industry. So my question is, if you're going into something that's not high R&D like luxury brands or consumer goods where it's more about branding and market distribution, how can the international companies compete when the interest in China is on supporting national champions?
So it's a good question. There's a couple of ways multinationals have done it. Nokia came in with a low-end phone in China, which everybody, when they did it, thought, there's just no way. How are they going to beat local suppliers, providers with a lower cost phone? The way they did it is they created a global platform. It became their developing market phone. They had a global scale on components and parts. And in fact, they ended up coming in under the local players and obliterating a fair number of local Chinese handset manufacturers. You remember the point where Lenovo exited the business. I remember telling them, guys, you will never make a penny in the cell phone business. And there wasn't a lot of smiles in the room that day. So that is one way. There is one other thing. I don't know, recently there was an article on Li Ning, the gymnast Olympic champion, and they were talking about local Chinese firms in the sportswear business and how they were getting destroyed by the Nikes of the world, and you know, the Reeboks and those kinds of companies. And the issue is that, well, so the quick answer first: branding, right? And the multinationals are very good at branding, and the Chinese are not yet there. They spend entirely too much money on channels. Lenovo has done it very successfully because that's the key to winning in PCs, channels. But if you're Li Ning, it isn't channels, it's marketing, and they don't put enough money into marketing and advertising. So those are at least two ways that I've seen multinationals win. Just one other interesting anecdote. We had a French company that wanted to sell cheese in China. And when we did the market research, I think a French person eats more cheese in a week than a Chinese eats in a year. And so, you know, there are some products that it's just going to take another century maybe for there to be accepted. Maybe I'm wrong here. You know some cheese-eating Chinese?
Can I say a word? I will tell you why you're wrong. Because when I was in China 30 years ago, everybody said the Chinese will never drink red wine. They can't stand it. Just physically, it's impossible for them. And they are the biggest drinkers of French red wine for the time being. So I hope it will be the same for cheese.
Paul, once again, taking the risk of being a little bit analytical, I'll try to answer your question by dividing it into two parts. Either you are in the consumer products where branding has a lot of importance, or you are in the production side. If you are in the production side where technology is massively important, you have to check whether your industry is considered as a priority in the 5-year plan. In which case you are in deep trouble, because the amount of money that's going to be invested in R&D is going to be humongous. And the only way to make your journey safely is to invest more and faster, and it's fair competition. They will invest massively. It's not about IP infringement or whatever. It's because they have decided that they want to be the world champion in this technology. So if you are prepared to invest more and faster, there's a chance. If not, forget it. If you are in the branding area, I completely agree. We are discovering today in China that there are opportunities beyond just doing promotion and beyond activating channel and quick turnaround and sales-driven kind of campaign. And we are starting to build brands that can travel the world. And Li-Ning, I met with Li-Ning a few years back, and at that time, he was saying, well, I don't need to work on design. I don't need to build a flagship store. It's useless because I already have a domestic market of 1 billion people, and when I'm done with China, I will move to India, and that's it. Well, guess what happened? Branding image is taking a huge importance and role, and some of those international brands who have worked on their design, on the branding, on the image, on the dream, have probably made inroads faster and stronger than Li-Ning, and that's the reason why I'm a bit struggling those days. So branding on the one side and technology and investment on the other side.
I'm sorry, still on the same subject. My name is Virginie Morgon. I'm working for an investment company. We have a large portfolio of worldwide companies all across the sectors. And I think 1 out of 2 in our portfolio companies is facing immense problem in finding a way through China because of the regulation and the change of the regulation. And actually, that goes even beyond what you sort of touch upon. In prepaid technology, I'm talking about a company called Edenred. Only national companies can issue prepay, money, cards, you name it. So the regulation is just that, like this. So if you're not, 51% controlled by a local company, you cannot issue money. I give you another example, even in brands. Of course, if you're the top high-end luxury brands, you have a place there. You're risking, slower growth, but you of course have a place there. But take the cosmetic market, which is an enormous market and probably strong growth. Change of regulation again. You have to be produced locally for some of the brands if you're being distributed direct at home. The formula of the products have changed last year, so there's no more brands of none of the worldwide groups, including L'Oreal, which can be sold at the end of the year. So you have to restart again, R&D because the components of the product. So I can give you. And, it's only a few examples of companies which I follow because they are part of my portfolio investment company. These are big companies. For some of them I'm talking about. I mean, the protectionism is extremely high. And the recent change of, rules and regulation in each of those examples I've given, which are not really, you could debate about the prepayment, which might be considered as a bit strategic. But, cosmetic-wise, and I could give you many more examples, I think the market is going to become, not only is it difficult because it's large, diverse, and, Peking, Shanghai is something, and then the rest of is another world. but it's going to become even more difficult going forward unless, and I have no idea, politically things may change in the next 5 years, and a decision is being taken to open up more. But I think it's extremely tough, and there's only a few examples of extremely successful models or products which are making inroads from outside. It's a bit negative. I'm doing it on purpose because, you feel it's such an enormous, potential. I think everybody agrees on this. But then, how do you get to the country?
Maybe we can provide them some advice. I don't know.
I think we're going deeper and deeper.
No, we work on that every day. All the embassies, all commercial and economic services, we work on that. I don't know if it's going to be successful or not. We are in a period of transition also, so no decision will be taken before the end of the succession process, which will be in March next year.
Virginie, send them to us. Maybe we can have them.
I think that's a nice way to deal with it.
And more questions from the audience?
Well, I would like to know, what do you think of the experience that has been done by Hermès, building a Chinese brand, Shangxia, to have kind of a bridge between Western countries and Eastern countries? Do you think it's a way to avoid the type of issues Virginie just talked about?
Well, I participated a few days ago in the inauguration of the Shangxia shop in Beijing. I think it's a wonderful experience, and what they're doing is beautiful. But it's very different from what is done otherwise. I mean, it's Hermès, but it's a Chinese brand, and the idea is to push Chinese brand, Chinese civilization, because, well, they want to succeed. They want to be the first and before the US, but at the same time they're fascinated by US brands, the US way of life, and so on. So I think for the time being it's an experience, and I don't know if it's going to be a real model for other companies.
May I add my 2 cents to that point? I think let's separate how the government view foreign brands and how the consumer view foreign brands. In most of the cases, actually, especially for consumer-related brands, the local people actually prefer foreign brands, especially for luxury, because luxury is related to heritage, to the brand carry on a lot of history in it. And so it's very challenging to develop a local luxury brand. And people know that. And they don't mind to buy French brand or British brand. There are actually several cases. They did very well by turning around a European brand into Asia countries like Moncler, Mulberry. They all did pretty well in terms of leveraging the favor of Chinese consumers to foreign high-end brand. But back to your first question is how Chinese government looking at foreign brand. I think it's a reality that Chinese Communist Party, they are going to leverage nationalism for their own legacy, legitimate of ruling China. It will probably last for certain years. So in that sense, I agree with this gentleman. If you're focusing on consumer related, you don't have to you don't have to change your own identity, because the consumers, they are actually getting more and more sophisticated. You'll be surprised how much consumers actually understand intellectual luxury brand. We do some research, and we look at on internet. I was very surprised. A lot of brands, even before they came to China, people talk them a lot on website. So consumers, if you put it, luxury consumers, they were like 4 types of consumers. They were ultra wealthy people, entrepreneurs, or corrupted officers. They're big buyers, but in terms of numbers, they're not that much. And the important segments are we call it aspirational customers, like the higher income, white collar workers in big cities. And we call new rich, means the rich people in tier 2, tier 3 cities. All of them are making progress or getting more and more sophisticated on the brand. So I would actually suggest you insist your own heritage when you come to Asian countries.
20 years ago when I joined Publicis, I learned something from Pascal, one of my colleagues at Publicis, that we had moved from a world where either or was important to a world where and is becoming crucial. And I think that what Hermès has done is exactly that. You don't want to play with dice, and you want to know that you want to have all options. If people prefer a Chinese-born brand, they're going to work with Shangxia. And I'm a regular customer. I met with Zhonghe a number of times. She's usually coming to the forum. And a number of Chinese players or international players are trying to build their brand out of China, from China to the rest of the world. And there are international brands who are trying to enter into China. So if you have both options into your portfolio, you are in a safer place. And that's probably what Hermès is looking for, as well as a number of other companies, to offer both options to the nationalistic, patriotic people, and people who prefer to carry a international brand that everyone will admire because they carry it outside. This is typically what's going on with Shangxia. Certainly.
Shangxia might be successful if their shop in Paris is successful. So it will come back to China.
I agree.
Yeah, I would like to, Daniela, I work in a luxury company, and therefore this topic is obviously super interesting for me. Virginie, I agree with you in terms of bureaucratics and rule changing. This is a huge issue for us when we bring our products to China. But when I speak to young designers now in China, I'm so impressed by the creativity and by the drive. It's sort of, I speak to a lot of designers. This is unbeaten what these guys are telling me. I mean, it's amazing. They're sort of 25 and they know exactly where they want to go. So I think it's just a question of time. I mean, we've seen it with wine. You mentioned 30 years ago, we said nobody would drink wine in China, and now they produce very good wines themselves, and I think it's going to be the same with brands. I would say in 5 years, we're going to have, actually, maybe in 5 years already, Chinese luxury brands that will be actually quite famous. Shangxia is still very small, but this is one that they started, and they are still a lot linked to Hermès. People know that Shangxia is part of Hermès. But what's your feeling? Do you have really the feeling, given that you live there, consumers are looking for now, very soon, also Chinese modern designed luxury brands?
Well, I think not yet, but it will come soon. For the time being, that's not what they're interested in. No, sorry. For the time being, that's not what they're interested in. They prefer French or Italian luxury brands. But, well, in the future, it will probably change. It is interesting because China is very nationalistic, and people sometimes are even xenophobic and so on. But they're not interested in their heritage for, just the everyday's life. They're not at all. Even the rich Chinese, in fact, they duplicate the Western houses, American houses, and so on. They don't want to live in their own traditional houses, which are beautiful. And those who are living in those houses are foreigners. But, it will change. I don't know when, but
what's your gut
change.
feeling? Are we talking 5 years, 10 years? What's your guesstimate?
I don't know. It might take more time than other evolution in China. because what they want is to be modern, and to be modern for the time being is to be Western. And I think it was the same with our grandparents and so on. So I can't say if it's 5 years or 10 years, I don't know. Well, it will come at what point, I know at what point, but I don't know when.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. May I just add one point on that? I think, as I mentioned, for luxury customers, there are also different type of customers in China. For those leaders, fashion leaders, the extremely wealth and aspirational customers, they're actually more interested in the designer brand, international designer brand, like Tory Burch. You know, previously it was not as long history as the European brand, but because they got a lot of momentum in US and in some certain extent in Europe, they actually been very popular in China right now. Although they only have like one store in China, another store in Hong Kong, but the Hong Kong store have annual revenue like $5 million US dollars. So it's very small. So in that sense, customers are getting more sophisticated in terms of don't only buy for the logo, for the brand, but they also want to understand what associated with the brand, what associated with that design. To your question about whether Chinese designers can be successful, I think the fashion leaders in China will not just buy because it's a Chinese designer or because it's not a Chinese designer. They will still go for if you can really build a strong make them feel associated with their certain needs, but also it will be critical for them to make successful outside China first, and then they kind of say, well, okay, it's already a proven brand and accepted by the international fashion world instead of only being accepted by Chinese fashion world, because fashion world is actually quite international. People just follow what happened in US in Paris.
I remember interviewing Long Yong-tu, the negotiator for China when they entered the World Trade Organization, and he said there were always these two sort of forces in China working against each other. When he was negotiating, he would go back to the local Chinese, and every industry wanted protection, and he would say, well, that's not going to fly, and so what he depicted was this battle where somebody from an industry would grab hold of somebody in government and say, we're dying. The cosmetics guys are killing us. Protect us. And they've done it in multiple industries. Antennas, cell phone standards, cell phones. And just as the U.S. and France cannot pick winners, the Chinese cannot pick winners. That is the reality, right? And in cell phones, they delayed the licensing of multinationals. The multinationals ended up slaughtering them. They were behind. So I just had an antenna client. I know it's far away from Hermes bags, but antennas are pretty cool. And for years, they were locked out of China Mobile. Years. And now China Mobile's new TDMA standard isn't working. And so they're having to buy those high-end antennas. So it's nasty. Right? I think we've all tried to avoid China bashing in the last hour. We've done a good job of it. And you will go through these dips when, so it's a matter of staying in the game because it will swing back the other way. They're no better at picking national winners than anybody else. And the 7 strategic industries that they pick, every year it seems to be a different list, right? The golden flowers that they said they were going to win in, that changed. I mean, they said they wanted to win in central office switching. They won in central office switching, but it became an obsolete technology. So, it's going to take time, right? And it's going to be a slugfest just like every other market in the world.
I guess we have to come to the end of the session. So before we close it up, I hope each of our panelists can give us one single most important piece of advice for people who are interested in China or want to explore the China market. Let's say, start from, again, Madame Bachon.
Well, I think that's what I said. That's what I said before. Anticipate their dreams. if you want to be successful. Otherwise, of course, you have to see lawyers, you have to know about the regulations and so on, but that you know perfectly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anticipate your dreams. And Galan, please.
Yes, I think I mean, 2 words is, maybe I can translate 3. I think it's kind of really thinking long term, but act fast.
So think long term and act fast, which means probably today. Hongjin, please.
It's always a trade-off of insist your own integrity or be more tailor-made but locally. It really depends on your own industry, and you need to think it hard on that question.
Know what to do, and please, Jean-Luc.
As I've said, it's no longer either or. It has to be and. You have to move fast. You have to think short term and long term. You have to be a producer and in the consuming side. You have to be local and international. You have to be. It's a very demanding market. This is huge potential. So you cannot choose. You have to explore all options in order to if you are ambitious, you want to explore and cover from all sides. It's a very complex market, and but it's huge potential.
Yes, just be a superman, I guess. And last but not least, Paul. Yeah, superwoman, exactly.
I guess I have one word. Transfer is my word. Transfer.
Transfer.
Yes, transfer. So, well, I mean, when I was running Bain in China, my rule was if you were a local Chinese, you could not get promoted unless you transferred to the U.S. for 6 months. Right now, it created some pain, and I made exceptions for those who had poor, sick grandmothers. But you know, I would take a leave of absence and go to China for 6 months and do a lot of reading and you know, live in a Chinese neighborhood and educate yourselves and read as much as possible.
Thank you. So transfer. So please join me to give a big round of applause for our smart panelists who share with us all the insights. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure they will stay around for a few minutes, so feel free to approach them and share more thoughts with them.